You are listening to the People Centric Podcast, where we talk through the toughest challenges that people face at work and give practical advice to fixing those challenges. Thanks for joining our movement to create workplaces that are happier, healthier, aligned, and empowered by putting people at the center of all that we do.
Hey, people-centric leaders. I've gotten to read a book recently. And I say read a book, and I mean I've started a book. That's usually if I say like I've read a book, it usually means I've started the book and I've read parts of it and I get excited about parts of it. And then I get really excited and I start talking about it, but I don't read it from cover to cover. I'm just confessing. Everybody's laughing at me. Stephanie, you're a voracious reader, right? You dive in.
I'm shaking my head so hard. And now I will DNF a book, which if you're a book reader, you know the term, like did not finish. Like I don't finish every book I start, but I am like, okay, if it's a good book, like finish it. Don't just skim.
Don't just skim it. Go through every page. Yeah. Okay. Bethany, are you a read every page person on a book?
If I'm reading a book, yeah, for sure. I wouldn't call myself a voracious reader, but I like to listen to audiobooks a lot. So that's what I feel like this time of my life is like audiobooks in the car or when I'm working on projects or going on walks or whatever. That's what I like to do. And then if I'm reading a physical book, like it just takes me a while. Yeah, I kind of start a book too, and then it just like I slowly get through it.
It's funny, Bethany, if you get to work with Bethany long enough, like you find you're so nice the way you say things, but we say it like internally, like you're so nicely vicious sometimes. And like I said, Bethany, do you read books? And you're like, yeah, that's what reading a book means, is like you read the book. That's what it means. That's kind of what Bethany just said very kindly.
Well, that's why it was funny because we were talking about this book that you read and you waited till we recorded that you were like, I haven't really read the whole book. And I'm like, what?
I'm with Bethany on this one. Yeah.
That was a surprise to everybody. Diana, are you responding the same way? You're looking at me judgmentally right now.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Don and I have worked together for a really, really long time. And back in the day, we used to do this thing called Leadership Book of the Month. And we would read a leadership book and write like key points to it. And Don always said that he was reading these books, but then I was actually reading these books. And I would be like, Don, that's not really what. And he was like, well, that's the concept I took away from it. And I was like, yeah, but that's not really what it was saying. He was like, that's what I took away from it. And it drove me absolutely crazy. And then recently he was like, Diana, we should read this book because it's going to help us figure out how to structure our organization. And I read that thing cover to cover 6 times to make sure I understood what was going on. And then he was like, I don't know, I skimmed it. And I was like, dude, I'm going to murder you. What are you talking about? Every time. Every time. Yeah.
It's really cool to have like a Diana on the team or a Stephanie or a Bethany to say like, hey, I'm reading this book. And then they read it too. And then you're like, yeah, I know what I read, but what did you read? What did you read? Then you can get somebody to give you like a summary.
It's a very important sentence that ties it all together, but
okay.
Yeah, I mean, you missed the core concept, but cool. Yeah.
But okay.
That's okay. Yeah.
It's very fun.
We gotta keep you humble. You know?
So take everything we're about to say with a grain of salt, as I think that's what we're trying to say right now.
Oh my gosh.
Because we're calling out a book right here, but that's okay. It's all right. We're going to get into this here a little bit. So the book that I have completely not read from cover to cover is called The Happy City. It's by Charles Montgomery, and it talks about how to make a happy city. And I've been really interested. I've been very involved in the community. I've gone through like our Leadership Springfield program, served on the board there. I'm very interested in how to make happy organizations, but also like happy cities. How does a city be happy? And it talks about the factors that makes a city fulfilled, to feel happy. And one of the things that they start off talking about, which is the concept that I wanted to dive into, that you don't have to read every chapter to understand. You just have to read the chapter that's about this, is what I got into, is this concept, and it's a Greek concept called eudaimonia. Eudaimonia. If you're trying to spell it, it's Eudaimonia, eudaimonia. It's a concept, and Aristotle used to talk about the concept, so it's been around for a minute. And it's this concept of feeling fulfilled versus feeling happy. It's not just, so in a community, if you think about it, like if you've got a job and you've got food and you're taken care of and you're safe, like done, check. That should be a happy community. But what Happy City talks about is there's a higher bar than just that. Aristotle used to refer to this concept of saying like a cow chewing their cud out in the field is probably feeling happy in the moment, but they're not probably fulfilled. We as humans need more than that. Like we need something that's a different level. And that's where eudaimonia comes in. And they list these factors that lead to eudaimonia. And it's things like self-acceptance. Do you know yourself? It's things like environmental mastery. Are you able to move around in your community and your environment? It's things like positive relationships with others. Do you feel like you have friends? Do you trust the people you work with? It's things like personal growth. Are you learning and trying to achieve your own potential? It's things like a sense of purpose. It's, do you know what gets you really excited at the end of the day, or the things that piss you off at the end of the day? And then it's the things like autonomy. Do you have a choice? Do you have an impact? Do you feel like you're making an impact on the world? Can you influence the community around you? And I was reading this book and I thought, first of all, we've done a podcast episode on darn near every one of those factors. We've definitely done autonomy, sense of purpose, personal growth. That's what our podcast is about, and positive relationships with others. But the concept that struck us and that brought us into this conversation for this episode is it our job at work to make each other happy? You know, we talk about a city. Does the city need to be happy, or does the city just need to function? Does a business need to be happy, or does it just need to function? What is our role if you're a supervisor of people? Should you make your people happy? Can you go too far on that in terms of making your people happy? Can you actually over-empower people? So that's the topic for today. We're going to talk about happiness, but not just happiness. We're going to talk about eudaimonia. So starting off, let's start off, like, what does happiness and work, where do those two things go to? I can hear just about every boomer is listening to this. Good job finding the podcast, by the way, and clicking on it. Good job finding all that. I am making, Diana's like going, we're gonna have to edit that out because you're making fun of some people in our audience. But speaking with boomers and being a Generation X person who does two spaces between sentences and all those things else, I feel like I'm more with you than I'm against you right now. But good job finding us on this podcast. I can hear a lot of them saying, like, it's work. Why are we talking about happiness at work? So let's start off with that. Why are we talking about happiness and work at the same time?
Okay, I will tell a story. I don't really care about people being happy at work. At least that's what I thought for a long, long time. And when I joined People Centric, I sort of was like, man, this is a bunch of hooey. Like, guys, just, I don't know how we get people to work better, but just freaking work better, right? I don't know. And then as I watched Don do some of these things, like building a community and having relationships with people and like talking through some of these concepts and applying them, I also saw that happy people work better. And then I was on board. I was like, wait a minute, happy people make a profit? Okay, let's talk more. But it really took me seeing some of the things for me to believe it. But I do think that when you are happy at work, when you enjoy your work, you work better. And that in turn creates more for the company, which sounds really crappy, but it's good for you too.
I think that's good. Well, the word that popped into my head whenever you were talking, Diana, was like sustainability. Is because it's like the things that you were saying is like, I'm like, well, how would you, if people are just going to work just because it's work, like, how do you keep people motivated long term? Because that's at some point, people are just going to drop off and be like, I'm tired, I'm miserable, I can't do this anymore. Like, I'm going to cause issues as I come to work. I'm probably not going to be very productive. And so it's like, at some point, like, it can't just be work to work. But does that mean you can keep people happy all of the time? Or is it this bigger, term that Don's talking about that's more of a fulfillment and less of a happiness? And I think it's like, it just creates sustainability is what I think about when I think of this concept.
Yeah, I like that, Bethany, and I'll jump in on sustainability too, because I am an elder millennial, and I think we are of the generation that watched how like boomers and some Gen Xers worked, and I think a lot of millennials are like, I don't exist for profit, and we started things like Quit Talk, and like, I don't owe my job anything, and I got to protect my peace, and it's almost like the other side of that in kind of a twisted way of saying, like, I really believe like you deserve to enjoy and like what you do, and no, your job isn't responsible for like your ultimate sense of fulfillment and happiness in your life, but like there's there should be a middle between those two ends of the spectrum of like, I don't owe my employees anything, or like, I don't owe my boss or the company anything, because really then nobody's happy. The business probably isn't performing as well as it could be, which then, if it's a healthy company, means probably none of us are getting paid what we'd like to be paid. We're not making the impact that we'd like to make. We're not fulfilling our mission. And so, yeah, I love this idea of the eudaimonia of like, how do we find that kind of like happy middle, happy company where it's like, yeah, like the business is sustainable. And also, this is a really sustainable job for me, and I can be here and be happy, quote unquote.
You make me think, Stephanie, a few years ago, I had an opportunity to meet an executive who worked for a former company that no longer exists called Enron. If anyone has gotten to know anything about Enron, if you don't know anything about Enron, look it up. There's a lot that happened there. The company absolutely melted down and executives went to jail, and there were lots of challenges with all of that. And that person described, that executive was not going to jail, did not do anything like that, did not do anything illegal, described their experience as one of the best work experiences. They said it was a super happy environment. They were super excited to go to work every day. They said the work environment was tremendous. They were always happy. They were always joking around. There were all these perks. There were all these things. And she missed that part of that. But obviously, there was a miss in terms of like, we talk about empowerment and alignment piece. Like the empowerment part was probably dialed up quite a bit. But obviously, the alignment piece was missing because they didn't really know what winning even looked like as a company. They were very happily drove right off of a cliff and in some of them into jail. Like they very happily did that. So maybe like, what's the difference at work between like the happy versus the eudaimonia concept fulfilled? Like we keep saying happy, like they even use the term happy city. And I think it's funny, like in one of the first chapters, they say like, we call it happy city, but we don't mean happy city because eudaimonia city doesn't probably sell as many books, right? So what do we mean? What's the difference between those two concepts?
I was really worried when you started telling the Enron story because that whole experience was wild. We'll tell that on a different podcast. But
I saw your worried face. You're like, how much are you going to tell about that story? I'm like, no, I left a lot of details.
Wild experience with that. But anyway, I think that a lot of times to just be happy means you forego some difficult things. And if you're willing to do some of the difficult things, you can reach fulfillment. And so I think happiness is just like a subcategory of fulfilled. I don't think it is like the higher being of fulfillment. I think happiness is a lower base level emotion, and fulfillment is where you want to reach.
Yeah, I like that.
I was gonna say, I agree with that. I think it's like not just like happiness in terms of like pleasure, right? And I think that's like kind of what you were describing, Dawn, like happened at Enron, is like we were all very pleased and happy all the time, and we got all these perks, benefits, and anything I asked for, I got and I wanted. Or we'll see that even with companies now that are like, they're trying to retain talent by just giving employees everything they ask for, every request. You got it. You want to do this? It's ordered. You want more flexibility? Yes. Work from anywhere. Actually, you don't even have to work and log in as long as you do just a tiny bit, right? And it's like this overemphasis on like what we would say like pleasure, the word pleasure, of just like a little bit of that dopamine hit, or what we would call like over empowerment, because then we lose sight of wisdom, I think. And that was one thing when we were talking about eudaimonia, and I looked that up, that like they make a point of saying like there's a piece of this that is also rational activity. It's not just heedless, oh, what could I do to feel great or make somebody feel awesome in this moment, because that takes us into like toxic positivity and people pleasing spaces, which don't serve people well. Of like, no, there still has to be like thoughtful engagement with this. We still have to use wisdom in the decisions that we're making, that like the happiness is governed by reason.
Yeah, I like that. So like I like bourbon, and I have enough bourbon. I could drink bourbon a lot more than I do, but that's excluding reason. So it's not like a hedonistic, I'm just going to go do whatever I want to do. It's more of a thoughtful approach to things. And when employees are asking for everything, we have to be thoughtful about what makes sense, right? You can't just say, well, yeah, we'll get. I had a conversation with somebody recently. I told them about our open time off policy, and they were like, oh, you have an unlimited time off policy. And I said, no, we do not have an unlimited time off policy. We have an open time off policy. Those are two different things. And I have heard employees say, we should have an unlimited time off policy. It's like, yeah, okay, no, we can't do that. So things that like drive towards pleasure are things like what are things that help like the pleasure side for employees, and are they really bad? Like let's give some examples.
I mean, one that comes to mind for me is like the company credit card, right? And when you hear that phrase, depending on your work experience, those could mean very, like, you might elicit lots of different emotions. Like, I've had friends who they're like, I have a company credit card. And so they use that as like a blank check. So they were going out to dinners and eating lobster and steak every night because it's the company credit card, right? And then I've also worked in jobs where like every 10 cents that I spent on the company credit card was scrutinized, and like you couldn't have found a coupon at Staples when you bought that. Don't you know that there's always a 10% off coupon available on their website when you go to buy a ream of paper?
I'm sorry,
Right?
Stephanie. I think that you could have found a coupon.
For the record, it was not Diana. That's not a 100% true story, but it is based in an incident that happened to me once at Office Depot. Yeah, and it wasn't Office Depot's fault. But I think that is one example of like, yeah, I think there are sometimes nice things you can do for your employees, or maybe like we do a nice lunch, or even, if we talk about how our team kind of uses the company card and we'll do team lunches and let's go grab a coffee together, do something like that. That's really great. But there still has to be the reason attached to it of like, no, you can't go have a steak dinner and lobster and put whatever you want on the company card. There's got to be reason.
I think about like our espresso machine, right? Like that, we have an espresso machine that can make cappuccino and like keep like oat milk and stuff in and we buy good coffees and stuff and put it in there. And just about every day, somebody uses that machine and makes a cappuccino or mocha. Somebody comes from outside the office and our team's like, what would you like? Like we'll play barista for people. Like that thing gets used more than I even thought it would, like more than I hoped that it would.
It's really one of the hardest workers on our team.
Yeah.
It definitely goes through the daily grind. You know what I mean? It's literally got a grind. See what I did there? See what I did? But I think when some people come from the outside, they might look at it and say like, wow, our team is happily making lattes for somebody who's coming to visit our office. And they say, wow, your team looks really happy and engaged. I have had people ask me, more than one person has asked me and said, wow, that cappuccino machine really did a good job of making your team like happy in the moments and like making them engaged. And I've said, like, I don't think what you're feeling when you interact with our team came from the cappuccino machine. You can't just go buy the machine and suddenly get what you think you're seeing, which is really more of like the true engagement side of things. So it's like there's a bigger level there. So maybe we know that like those things like the ping pong tables and the potluck suppers and stuff bring happiness, but we're looking for something deeper than that, right? So how do we get deeper than that? How do we get beyond just that? Well, I'm going to give my employees stuff and then they're going to just suddenly be really engaged and they're going to do a better job. Like how do we get to that next level? How do we get to the eudaimonia level for our people?
I think it starts with the relationship building, right? You talk a lot about how you have to connect with the people who you work with and you have to know them. And that builds a relationship, which then builds psychological safety, which then builds that ability to fail forward and do things and try things and all of those things. So much of this ties back to you have to build a relationship with the people that you're around.
Yeah, and I think that there's two parts of that, because I think there's like the personal side of it. That's what I think some of what we're talking about too, that people I think undervalue in the workplace, or they might overvalue it too, and then that causes all kinds of problems too. And so it's either dialed way too high or it's just non-existent. And so figuring out how to balance that. And then the other side of it is like, I think people have, they tell us all the time, like, well, I talk to my team all the time, every day. We're always working on stuff. We're always talking. We're right next to each other. We're in and out of each other's offices. And that's really, that's really good. Sorry, my voice is going out on a podcast, which is terrible.
I get it. You're getting choked up. This is an emotional topic.
It's really
okay.
Good. So I think the other part of this though, is that like there's like a deeper level to it. I think there's the personal side of it, but then there's like a deeper level to like collaboration, I think, on teams too, that sometimes we underestimate. Of like, we talk about the day-to-day work, but sometimes we forget to like lean on our team in different ways too. And I think that's something that like our team has experienced a lot of as well, is that there's like, I'll try not to get too in the details here, but like when we can do some of our work where we say, hey, can you jump in and lead this thing? Or, hey, can you take this thing? Or, hey, can you take this thing? And that's fine and good, but there's a difference when we say, hey, I want to work on this together, and I want to think through how we talk to this client about this thing, or how we, launch this new thing, or whatever it may be. And that's like a different level of collaboration and communication and work that you do. And so those are, I think I just want to cast that vision a little bit in this conversation, because I think there is the personal connection and relationship building, and then there's a collaboration that's different than that day-to-day, like you take this, you run this, that kind of a thing. And it's just a little bit of a deeper level of collaboration.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think a lot of times we'll see leaders just like start delegating things, and they're like, well, I'm giving my team lots of things to try and lots of tasks to do. And like, sometimes we do just need to like to delegate and like to get the work done, right? Like, I'm only one person. I need to parse out some of these tasks. But I think there is a moment of stopping to think, who on my team might be best suited for this, who might want to learn this. And even like, do you know why people on your team work for you? And like, do you know why they work at the company? And again, like, I know as I'm saying this, somebody out there is thinking, well, like, well, I can't think about that every time I delegate a task. Like, that's like rainbows and unicorns of like, well, you're just perfectly suited to this and you just want that. Absolutely. Like I said earlier, sometimes we do just have to delegate a task. We have to execute, like Bethany was saying, like, we've got to pass this off. We've got to get this done. But I do think part of the maybe eudaimonia is like knowing, and like, have you had the conversation at some point with people on your team to understand like what does fuel them or motivate them? Like, why do they work at your company? And so that way, when you have those moments where you are able to be more collaborative, or you are able to take a little space and develop someone, that you have the ability to do that because you've built the relationship with them, you've had those conversations, you understand that piece of like that personal growth for them, of what personal growth looks like, and you've got the positive relationship with them to be able to go and say, hey, yeah, like, we're about to work on this thing. And you've told me before, like, this is some of what fuels you and drives you. And I know it'd mean you're taking on extra work right now, but like, is that something that you'd want to do? Do you want to try it right now? Or do you want me to hold on that and come back to you later?
Gallup says that 80% of people who have had a meaningful conversation about their work in the last week are engaged. Just that one factor, 80%. Now put that to the national average of employees who feel engaged. The national average is 32%. So like, you reverse engineer that and you flip that around, that means most employees in the United States don't get meaningful feedback about their work. And meaningful feedback, I think we're in this old paradigm of, it means that was a good job or that was a bad job. But Bethany, I love what you said about like, it's more about that. It's like, are we collaborating on it? I think you and I had a good example this morning, Bethany. We haven't even talked about this, but you sent me, we're doing a reorganization for a company, and I haven't been directly involved in the reorganization for the company, but Bethany has been, and Bethany put some stuff out and just sent it to me and said, hey, what do you think about this? And I spent some time and dove into it and said, oh, here's some things here. And it wasn't, Bethany, I think you're doing a good job here. Or it wasn't judging Bethany. It was literally like two colleagues working together. Like, here's the things I see. What do you see? And here's what I see. And that builds it both ways. That's what's kind of cool about that. It's not like a manager to employee relationship piece of that. It's like, no, we're building trust by learning how we think and how we approach problems. And we're learning from each other on that. And that helps to build a working relationship at a deeper level.
Yeah, and it's like, I think it just takes pressure off of a team too, that and leads to this feeling of connection and eudaimonia. Am I saying that right? And just because it feels like, okay, like, I have people who have my back, and if I'm not on an island, I don't have to do all the things by myself. And if I want to get, input, or if I want to learn something, or if I don't know how to do something, like, I have the trust of my team to be able to help support me and think through this, because it's our problem to solve together.
Yeah. So let's touch, like you also said, we talked a little bit about like the personal side of those conversations. We also did an episode probably over a year ago that was talked about like we're like your job's not your family. Like we've heard people say like we're trying to build a family environment in our company and it's family and we care about each other and we love each other and all those things. And we said that can go too far. So let's help balance like the personal side of things. Where do you go personally in terms of relationships? That could be with coworkers, that's with employees, that's with bosses, whatever. What's a healthy personal relationship look like in the work environment?
What a deep, loaded question. I don't know. I feel like there's so much to that. I genuinely care and I love the people that I work with. I want to know about their lives. I want to know what's going on with them. I want to help them if they need help. I don't know where too far is too far. I don't think that I would show up at their family reunion. That's I wouldn't do that, right? Like I don't know how far is too far. It's sort of like I would know it if I saw it, but I do genuinely care and genuinely enjoy the people that I work with. And I want to know about their lives and like I want to do those things, but I also know that if I need something for work, they're going to do the work thing for me, right? So there is some boundary there. I don't know where it is, but
Yeah. Yeah. And again, without giving like really specific examples, I think there are things you can do to help support people personally, but you don't have to do. And that's okay too. I think there's choices. There's lots of like choices that you can make in this regard. And it's still okay if you don't do some of the same things we do. So, I mean, I'm just thinking about like we have people on our team who have helped other people move to their new house, or we've had people help say like, hey, you need this resource. Let me help connect you to this resource. None of those things are required. We don't have to do any of those things. And we're not even saying that businesses should do those things. I think that's totally a personal choice. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that there is, to Diana's point, like I think you kind of know it when you see it. There's probably some relational boundaries though that you should say of like, I don't know, we're like, most of us are not just like having each other over for dinner all the time even, and not that we maybe wouldn't do that sometime. I think it's just not like a regular part of our relationship as a team. And so there's just, I don't know, I think it kind of depends on the team, but yeah, I don't know, I feel like you would kind of know when you see it too, or if it starts impacting things negatively at work. So again, yeah, I don't know, we've talked a little bit more about that on that other podcast,
I
but
have
Yeah.
seen some of those teams that like go and have drinks every single night. And I'm like, man, that's probably a little too far.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I almost think of it as like your work family should be a part of your work team should be a part of the village, but not the village. Like they are not your family. They can't be the only thing, right? And I think that's where I'll see it veer toward unhealthy sometimes in relationships or people's lives, where it's suddenly like the people that you work with become the entire village. And again, it's hard saying that because we're like, you'll know it when you see it, of like, I do think you should be able to have close relationships with the people that you work with. I think you absolutely can become close friends with the people that you work with. I mean, one of my very best friends is someone who like we met because we worked together and now we've been friends for like a decade. And now she is a critical part of my village, but I think there should be a boundary there where if you find yourself feeling like that's the whole village and there's not support or community outside of that, it puts you in a really precarious position because, like we've been saying, your work isn't your family. They can't be your family. There are conditions to those relationships. There are power dynamics that are not always fair in those relationships. So, yeah, I know we're all kind of like, I think, saying the same thing of like, you kind of do know it when you see it, and you can feel when it's off and you can feel when it's healthy. And so I think, yeah, there definitely should be relationship, there should be community. But when it starts saying like, yeah, like you're the only ones I've got, or I'm relying on you for everything I would rely on a family member or a community, like my whole village for, it's probably unbalanced.
yeah. Yeah. And Don, you mentioned when we were talking about this, like if you're thinking about a community, your community that you're in, your community is also not your family. So I don't know, maybe you could say more about that, because I think that is a really good way to think about it too. That, yeah, you might change. There might be factors that change within your role within the community, but maybe you still live in that community too. And so, yeah, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think they know it when you see it is brilliant. And because then you go think like, you know what when you see what. And I think what you know is what you know and how you feel, and what you see is how the other person feels. And so like any healthy relationship advances when both sides see that and both sides cautiously move forward. I think where companies get in trouble and communities get in trouble is when, well, you should just love it here. And you should just love it here. You should be like, if you're coming into our company, you're part of our family. And they don't recognize power dynamics. Look, if you are somebody's supervisor, boss, if you own a company, like I am very cautious about what I ask from our team, because I recognize that while I think I have a great relationship with everybody in our company, I also do have a lot of power over the people, because I ultimately sign those paychecks. They're not actually, yeah, Diana actually, Diana does that. Diana has all the power over me. Maybe I should do it that way. And Diana's got the control.
We're cautious. We're cautious with our relationship. It's fine.
It's fine. It's all fine. But at the same time, so if I went to everybody and I said, like, I'm moving and I expect everybody to help me to move, because that happened last year. Like I went through a divorce, and I was hesitant to ask the team because I was worried about, like, if I needed help, I need some help. I was hesitant to ask the team for help, and I ended up not asking the team for help. But you guys came to me and said, we want to help you. Would you? And you actually asked me, you didn't just say, do you want to help you? I think the way that you put it is you said, would you let us help you? And looking at it, then it's like, when I know it, when I see it, what I knew in that moment was that, yes, I needed the help. And what I saw is that you also wanted to help. And I thought that, I mean, it was a great moment for me personally. It was super helpful for me, but I do think like it's another step that kind of brings us closer. If suddenly somebody brand new on our team comes in and I'm like, hey, could you go run to my house and could you mow my lawn for me or something like that? That's not, I've seen executives and like, we say that like jokingly, but we all have stories. Like I've seen like literally stories like that. Could you go feed my dog for me? Go to my house and go to pick up my dry cleaning. Like, and it's not like that person's normal job. It's just like, no, we're like a family. I don't mind giving you that. Like, that's not a family. That's an employee who you're giving an order to go do something. So that's different. It's okay to get to different levels. So that if somebody on our team came in and said, look, I don't ever want to go to somebody else's house. I don't ever want to do dinner. I don't want to ever do that. But they're an excellent connection with their team. Like, great, you could fit into our culture and do that. That's totally fine. It doesn't have to be that connection. It's what both sides are comfortable with. Last piece I think we could plug into here is we threw out the term at the very beginning of this, is this over empowerment idea. You know, we talk about the balance between empowerment and alignment, and we say it's not just a lever. Can we go overboard, and what do employers do to go overboard, or even employees to go overboard for each other, that maybe we over empower other people? What does that look like? Can we try to make people too happy? Can we lean into that too much, and what damage does that cause?
One thing I was looking at when you kind of had mentioned like the different factors that are listed in this book, and some of it is like I think the first one is like self-acceptance. And it's like the questions were like, do you know yourself? Do you know your own strengths and your abilities? And do you get to apply those? And I think that's one thing that like we always say, that's amazing. Yes, like that should happen within an organization and within roles, is like that's something that's going to lead to highly productive people if people are working within their own strengths. But I think if there's no sort of like guardrails around that, then like you'll definitely get people who are way too empowered. So if we just say like, yeah, we want everybody to be happy, right? Then we're just going to let people do whatever they want. So like they only get to do the things that they're good at. And then if they're bad at the other stuff, then we just like then they don't have to do that stuff, you know? And so I think that's where I think sometimes that can be dialed up too much, where it's like, okay, well then people are over empowered. And then anytime they're being asked to do something that's not within, you know, their categories of these are the things I'm good at, or these are my strengths, then I don't have to do them. Then it's going to be a fight, or there's going to be some kind of issue, or it's not going to get done, or whatever that might be.
Yeah, that's kind of a rebound that I've seen. There's been a big emphasis on positive psychology, the strengths-based idea of like, you should focus more on your strengths. there's been kind of a negative reaction to some of that too, that we've all seen, I think, from some employees of saying, well, that's great. I only have to do with what I'm good at. And then sometimes that gets twisted in when if I'm good at it, that means it's also probably pretty easy for me to do. And it's taken away some people's grit, their ability to jump in and just like, I got to just go do this thing. Or sometimes it's hard to learn something. Sometimes it takes a little bit extra effort to jump into something. And that's not good for people in terms of their development to say, I'm only going to do what I'm naturally good at. You need to take your existing strengths and certainly pivot on those things, but also put you learn more outside your comfort zone, certainly in terms of working together. Also in terms of the other side, like what do you give to each other as employees? Like I talked to an employee inside of an organization recently who does a lot of things. They're a self-confessed people pleaser. They like to do things for other people. And so they were telling stories about like on their team with somebody who needed something and they jumped in and like did a lot of stuff for the team. Like I'll take on your burden and I'll take on your burden. I'll take on your burden. And they were doing so much and they were taking on too much, like taking on just a lot. And they were starting to resent like the people around them. I've seen employers do this with employees too, of like, well, I tried to give it to the team. They didn't take it. So I took it back because they didn't want to do it. And now I'm doing all this work and now I'm resentful of that. And I'll confess, like I've done that before. Like I'll take on this burden and I'll say like, I remember we've talked about this story, like during the pandemic, we were starting to get busy again. And there was one weekend I was working on a bunch of stuff and it was like on a Sunday and I had to get something done by like early Monday. And I was sitting there and I was pissed at you guys. I was like, sitting there like, why you guys get the weekend off and I'm working here on a Sunday. And I finally put out the call and said like, guys, I need help. And everybody who was available, like jumped in and said like, we'll help you with this thing. So, I mean, there's a little bit too of like, if you are trying to help everybody else a little too much and you start to get resentful over that, that's not good for that relationship either.
Yeah, I actually saw this come up in a topic just when I was like scrolling on social media yesterday of like what happens when like the way that I'm trying to care for you doesn't feel like care to you. And it was that example exactly, like someone was telling their story about how they are just like a people pleaser and they're like over nurturing everyone on their team or everyone in their life. And then all of a sudden they're like, no one's grateful for it anymore. And even when I pointed out, they're like, yeah, that doesn't feel like love to me when you do that, because we all can sense the motive, I think, sometimes behind things and knowing like, no, you're not just doing this because it was like, wow, like you wanted to be really generous and do that. You just do it because like of what's happening in your brain and in your mind. And I think our teams feel that too. Like if you are doing everything for them, I think that's where like that over empowerment starts to come in, because then you've set the expectation that that is what they are owed, right? That is what they are owed in the workplace, is that you will meet every need, you will meet every demand, you will answer every question, you will pick up everything that gets dropped. And that doesn't help your team, because then to your point earlier, Dawn, like they're not actually learning or growing at all. They're remaining really stagnant. They still have strengths, but they're actually not really using them because those strengths, those muscles aren't getting flexed. Like it is a muscle that they have, but it's not really getting used. And so I think we have to be careful of that, because a lot of us really, really care a lot and we really, really want to help people, but understanding like sometimes when we do those things for our team, it does over empower them and they start becoming entitled, and then we get resentful of them, and then we're really mad because we were just trying to care and love them, and why don't they feel loved by us?
Yeah. I remember early on in my career, I was trying to follow the strengths-based thing, right? I was trying to be a leader who allowed their team to use their strengths. And one time we were like building a bunch of desks. And I asked this one person, I was like, oh, can you help me build this desk? And he was like, oh, that's like really not in my strengths. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. In the moment, I was like, that makes sense. And then I'm sitting there struggling to build a desk because quite frankly, it's not in my skill set either. And I was so mad that I was like stuck building this desk without any help. I was, managing these giant pieces. I don't know how to use a drill. This is not my thing. I have learned since then. But I was really mad that no one was helping me like build this desk. And then I was like, this strengths-based thing is a crock. Like this is a sham. I no longer believe this because I'm not working in my strength and now everybody else gets to work in their strength. And I was really mad about it. And it did cause a weird rift that the other person didn't know about. The other person had no clue that I was like sitting there angry about this thing. And I didn't say it. And I kept trying this like strengths-based thing without mentioning that like, oh, this isn't actually in my strength either. I think we should just like work together to get it done, which is what I should have said, right? And so it caused this weird rift that lasted a long time until that person left. And I couldn't ever let it go because they said that thing to me. And I was like, I should have just had the tough conversation.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Ryan Howard thing in the Office when Pam asked Ryan to clean the microwave, and he's like, "I'd probably screw it up. I can't. I'd probably screw it up." She's like, "You'd screw up cleaning the microwave," and he's like, "I'd find a way. I would mess it up. You don't want me cleaning the microwave." And it's just like, what? What are you talking about there? So I think this concept of eudaimonia is really powerful because we think about happy, and it's like, and I get like, do you want a happy workplace? Like you want it, but that's not really the goal of the workplace, right? But eudaimonia, when people are really feel fulfilled, they produce more. They actually do more. And we've talked about that. Like there's an upside for people. We've talked about teams and examples and examples and examples of people who feel a connection to their work and the people that they work with, and how when the companies do that, they make more money. It helps them to actually produce more. Like the person themselves are more productive. When I'm at a conference and someone comes to me as a manager or supervisor and says, my team is entitled, I don't think, wow, I'm so sorry you got that team. I'm wondering, what are you doing that's making them feel entitled? And that doesn't mean that the employees aren't showing up sometimes and leaning into that. So if you're an employee and you're leaning into this and you're starting to ask for everything, I'd check yourself on that. You might be missing a bigger picture there. And it's not helping you in your career, by the way, if they're thinking you're entitled. That's not going to help you to get the things that you really need to get. That's limiting your own power. But also, like if you're in a manager, you're saying, I'm this young generation, they're just all entitled and they want everything and they have poor communication skills and everything. Again, as the consultant, I don't hear you say that and say, that's too bad that your team sucks. I hear that and say, there's opportunities for you to better manage your team. And those opportunities might be to, yes, have personal conversations with your employees, but be careful about it. Dip your toe in the water, not your head in the water, dip your toe in the water and listen and see what the response is. Some employees might like jump into it and they might share a little bit more. Don't coddle, right? Don't coddle them and say, well, yes, I'll do whatever I'll come over to your house and I will wash your dog, whatever you want me to do. But those personal conversations do go a long way. And like, you'll know it when you see it, whether it's going the right way or not, if the person shares those things. That connection leads to a balance. Everything we're talking about is balance. And I talked about this, Bethany and I were at a physicians leadership workshop down in Florida, training some physicians. And it was a concept that we talked about early on about the throttle versus like the knob. And, we as leaders want to have the throttle where you go all in on a thing. Well, we want to make our people happy. Let's go all in on it. So let's do all these things. And then we coddle and we over empowerment. Or I want our company to feel like a family, and we go all in on that and say, everybody come over to my house every Saturday and we're going to do a group dinner and everybody bring your families and we'll all get to know each other and it'll be great. And we go too far with it. Really, inside of leadership, a lot of things that we talk about, and this is what the book talked about in Happy City, or I think it's going to talk about. I don't know. I haven't read it. It's a dial. It's really like we're looking at a dial of like, yes, is it no personal conversations with your employees? No, that's the wrong way to look at it. Don't run at a 1. Is it a 10 where you're only talking about personal conversations? No, you should find like that 5 or 6, somewhere in there where it's like, I do care about you. I do care that you had your kids had a softball game last week, or that you had a loss in your family, or that you just went on vacation. I care about those things. And if I show you that, then you're going to care about other things that are at work. Any other thoughts there from our team?
I did have a thought about the over empowerment. I think that when leaders just start saying yes to everything, they're like, okay, I got to say yes to that. And I want my people to be happy and I got to say yes to that. I think we forget that adults can hear the word no and still be happy. You just have to tell them why you're saying no. We can tell them no. We just have to tell them no with context and understanding and empathy, and like give them the reason you're saying no, and they'll go away happy and understanding it. Like I think a lot of times we forget that adults can hear the word no and they're okay with no and they'll still be happy with no. You just have to do no well.
I agree with that. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Great point. All right. Well, thanks for joining us on this one. I hope that you all find some eudaimonia in your life so that you can make more demonia at your job. How's that? I dropped that beforehand, and I think Diana has cringed multiple times on this episode. I'm just watching. We get to see each other's face, and Diana's definitely cringed more than once. So I feel like I've done my job.
I'm horribly uncomfortable. This whole episode might be edited out.
Perfect. Excellent. Well, great. Well, thanks for joining us on this special 3-minute episode of the People Centric Podcast. Hope to catch you next time, and thanks for being out there.
Thank you for listening to the People Centric Podcast. We are so grateful for you joining us every week. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. Also, feel free to share on your social media with everyone that you know. It really does help us. If you would like to contact us, I have put our information in the show notes. Please reach out anytime. We love hearing from you. We will be back next week with a new topic. Until then, be well and lead well.